Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. My name's Danielle and I'm the owner of Damn Fancy Creations and the Drunk Flamingo Glitter. If you guys are new to my channel, I do want to let you know that all of my links and groups are posted in the description below in case you guys want to check them out. In today's tutorial, we're going to be learning a fun 3D rainbow tumbler that I created out of clay, as well as a fun diamond wrap with vinyl and ombreing glitter and applying our vinyl decal. I thought this rainbow design would be really fun for spring, and I love how it turned out. Of course, it has to have leopard print on it. The glitter and vinyl you can all find on my website, thedrunkflamingo.com. Everything that you see listed here will be covered in this tutorial, but as always, if you guys have questions, please feel free to ask in the comment section and I will come back and ask, or you can join my Damn Fancy Creations group on Facebook where you can also post questions and I will answer them. But for now, we're going to go ahead and get started on this tutorial and I hope you guys enjoy. Alright guys, so before we get started on the actual tumbler, we are going to remove the bottom cap so we can do a glitter butt. I just like to use a metal putty knife and a hammer. I hammer it between the cap and the tumbler and it pops right off. I am using a 24 plump from the Steel Magnolias. If you guys did not know, all of the Steel Magnolias tumblers, except I think the curved mug, you can remove the bottom cap so you can do fun things with the bottom. Once I have that removed, I am going to start making the rings for my rainbows. I am using a clay extruder and the single hole disc. I am just rolling out my clay. I just mixed different colors together and kind of placed them in a line of how I want my colors to look. And I thought that these looked really good together, kind of a boho spring vibe. They also went well with the pink leopard vinyl that I was also planning on using. And with the clay extruder, you basically just twist the edge and it pumps out the clay in this little line. I picked up this clay extruder, I think from Hobby Lobby or Michael's. You can also get them on Amazon. So I'm just going to speed up the rest of this process. You do have to kind of put some muscle into pumping out this clay. I think that this part of the video is sped up like 10 times, so it did take me a lot longer to extrude all of this clay, but it's fairly simple to do. It just may take a little time. And then once I get all of the colors extruded out, I'm going to start forming my rainbow on the tumbler. And I just did this freehand. It's very simple to do. I just started with my center little rainbow ring. I cut off the edges. And I am just kind of pressing the clay onto the stainless cup just to form an initial bond, just so it will stay still. And then I'm going in with the second ring and I'm just applying it directly above the first ring. I am not too concerned with getting the bottom part of the rainbow matched up exactly because I am going to go back and straighten all that up so that they're completely even. And I am just lightly pressing the rings into the clay and it kind of forms that bond. So we are just going to keep going around the rainbow rings with our next color. And you can make your rainbow as large or small as you want to. I did want mine to be pretty big because it was going to be the focal point of one whole side. So now that all of my rings are on there, I'm just moving this clay back for now. And I'm going to take this edging tool from Cami Page Boutique. I do have a discount code down below. This is technically designed to trim vinyl at the top and bottom rims, but I find all sorts of uses for it. So for right now, I am just using it to cut the clay evenly on my tumbler. So I am just kind of making those indentions, and then I'm just picking off the clay that is below those indentions. So now I know my rainbow is going to be even along the bottom edges. And then I also decided that I wanted some fringe on my rainbow, like the knitted rainbows that you see. So I picked a disc that had several small holes in it, and I thought that that would be a good use to make some like knitted material, some strings. It kind of looks like pasta right now. But I am just cutting little sections and attaching it to the bottom of my rainbow. These tweezers really did come in handy. And you guys can see that I'm not like placing them in a straight line. I'm kind of spreading out those, they're not fibers, but they look like fibers, so that it doesn't look too perfect and it really does mimic the texture of string. After I had epoxied this tumbler, my husband was looking at it and went to touch this part of the clay, and he was confused because he really thought that they were real little fabric pieces. I was like, no, it's just clay. So I'm just kind of spreading it out. And then I also use my silicone tool to kind of blend the white string-like clay into the rainbow so it doesn't look so detached. And then we're going to do the same thing on the other side. I am also taking individual little pieces and just kind of attaching them on top. And I'm just using my blade to kind of trim them off. You guys can see that I'm not trimming them all the same length because I do want it to look a little bit more realistic. They're not all going to be the same length all the way across. I did need a little bit more clay, so I'm just pumping some more out real quick. And then I'm just going to trim everything, put little pieces if I feel like some spaces need more. And then I'm doing the same thing with my silicone tool. I'm just smoothing those edges out so they look more cohesive in one piece. So now that we have all of our rings on there, I'm going to go in with some acrylic paint, and we're going to add some leopard print and some little dots to 2 of the rings. If you guys did not know, you can paint on polymer clay with acrylic paint and bake it in the oven. I used to do this all the time when I would make earrings. That's how a lot of people make patterns on earrings. So I decided just to bake it on there instead of painting it afterwards. But obviously, if you prefer to paint it after you bake it, you can do that as well. But I am just going in with a tiny paintbrush and just making leopard print all the way around the ring. And I'm sorry if that dog barking is distracting. I don't know where he's coming from. So once I get finished with this leopard print, I will go back and just check the edges, make sure I don't need to add any little spots underneath or on the edges. And now I'm going in with a very small dotting tool, and I'm just making little dots on another ring. And once I get everything completed, I am going to pop this in my oven. I typically will set my oven to about 255, 260 degrees because I know my oven gets a little bit hotter than that. I do have an internal thermometer, but you do want to cook it at around 275, and I leave mine in for an hour. The longer you bake your polymer clay, the longer those plastic polymers have time to bond together and form a really strong bond. The only way that you are going to burn your clay is if the temperature gets really hot. So if your oven spikes and gets 300, 325, then it will burn the clay. That's why I always suggest having an internal thermometer other than the digital one on the outside. But after we bake this rainbow, we will be ready to move on to our next step. All right, guys, so now that our rainbow is baked, we are just going to pop it off, and now we are going to decorate the tumbler. We are going to start by cleaning off all of that clay residue that was on there. And now I am going to make the template for my diamond that I'm going to cut out of my leopard vinyl. So I'm just folding a sheet of paper, making it a square shape. And I did want it a little smaller, so I am going to trim this about 1.5 inches on 2 sides, so it will still be a square shape. And we can get that diamond that we were wanting. Obviously, this cutter is not the best. Sometimes it works great, sometimes it rips my paper. So I like how this is matching up. I wanted those points to match up evenly in the back. So now we are going to trim our leopard print. I am just trimming the white off. You can get this pattern on thedrunkflamingo.com. So once my white edges are trimmed off, I am just going to lay this square that we already cut off. I am going to mark it with a Sharpie. And then I am going to take my cutter again, and we're going to cut those lines. And for some reason, this cutter does not really like to cut vinyl from the back. I don't know why. It's a pain. It did work semi-well for this paper. So now that I have my diamond cut out, I am just going to match it up. So that those points are even. And they look pretty good. Now I am going to remove the backing, And I tried to be really cool and just roll it on there, and it didn't really work. It is not even. And then I realized that my little workspace was covered with glitter. So I had glitter bumps all underneath my vinyl. So it was a hot mess. And I ended up having to remove it. But y'all know I like to show y'all my fails too. So at this point, I realized that there was glitter all underneath my vinyl. It was all over my desk. So this piece was wasted. So I cleaned off my desk. I recut everything. And then when I cut my little square the second time, I did it the way I normally do, which is slow and with my squeegee, so that I'm sure to get out any air bubbles. You know, sometimes you try to find shortcuts to save time, but, you know, slow and steady wins the race. So this is how I would normally do it. I would just flip one corner, and then I am just smoothing down the sides. And it ended up matching well. So now we are going to take our cami page edging tool like we did before. This time I am lowering it onto the half spacer, and we are going to trim that vinyl, which is technically what this tool was intended for. So we are just trimming off the top edge and the bottom edge. So now everything is nice and smooth and even. And then I was trying to see placement of my rainbow. I wasn't too sure where I wanted to put this. I did end up asking some of my other crafter friends, like, where should I place this? Which is why I ended with it on the leopard print front and center. But before we get to that step, we are going to glitter the blank spaces where the vinyl is not touching. I decided to use Sparkling Sage and Summer's End. You can find both of those colors on the drunkflamingo.com. And I am just taping off my vinyl. Sometimes I tape it off, sometimes I don't. Just depends on what kind of mood I'm in. And I did not base my tumbler because the glitter that I'm using is an opaque glitter. Both colors are opaque. They are not translucent, iridescent, opal, anything like that. So the underneath color is not going to show through regardless. It's only going to be the color of the glitter. So even if I base painted this white, it would not make a difference. And I am getting my Artistry's glitter glue. If you guys have not tried this, I highly suggest it. I used to be that girl that only used clear spray or epoxy to apply my glitter, but once I tried their glitter glue, it is very similar to the epoxy method. You just paint it on with a paintbrush and it evens out. It's very smooth and it stays tacky for a pretty long time. So you can even go back and do a second coat of glitter. The glitter glue kind of soaks up the glitter like epoxy would. But this is pretty much all I use to apply my glitter right now. And I like to take my tea strainer anytime that I'm doing ombres, and I am just sprinkling my first color right on that tumbler where I want it, and then it kind of cascades down the tumbler to form that ombre or color gradient. This one I guess would be an ombre because they're both kind of champagne-y colors. This is Summer's End. It is a rosy gold with a little bit of opal mixed in. And then we're going to use Sparkling Sage, which is a very, very light kind of champagne. And then we are going to angle our cup the other direction, and we are going to sprinkle our glitter on again with our tea strainer. My good one that I have is downstairs in my garage. This is a good second. This is one that I just found on Amazon. Now I am going to go back up with a little bit more of Summer's End and just kind of ombre that rosy gold into that champagne, just to get a good blend. This is how it looks now. We're going to remove that tape. And once this dries, I will spray a few light coats of Rust-Oleum 2 times, focusing on the glitter part. And then we are going to take this outside and we're going to epoxy. So now that the clear spray has dried, we are going to apply our fast set. I love Artistry's 1-to-1 fast set. It is very low odor, it is very clear, minimal bubbles, and it can be used as a top coat. For me in Georgia, it is typically dry to the touch within an hour, 2 hours max. I do have a space heater out there. So I will apply 2 layers of epoxy, and once that is dry, we will be ready to clean up the rims on our tumbler, apply our pinstripes, and our vinyl decals. So after our epoxy has cured, I went ahead and sanded any glitter grains that I felt. And now we are going to clean up the rims with our Cami Page Boutique Edging Tool. Typically, I would do this downstairs by running my tumbler under warm water to heat up the rims, but since I'm upstairs and filming, I am just using my heat gun just to lightly heat the rims and soften that epoxy just enough so that the blade can cut easily. My heat gun does have a temperature gauge on it, so I'm not using it on full heat. We just want it warm enough to cut through that epoxy. If you try to use this tool and cut through epoxy that is completely hard, you could either crack the rim or it just won't cut through. So I'm just using my little tweezers just to peel off the rim that we just cut. I will say, if I run this underwater, it is a lot easier than using my heat gun. It's just a better, I don't know, it just seems to soften it a little bit better without heating it. So now that I did my top rim, I'm just doing the same thing to the bottom rim. And again, I am just getting my tweezers and just pulling off that little rim of epoxy that we just cut. And I am just trimming this little piece of vinyl. It did not cut as well as I was hoping it would. And once everything looks pretty smooth, we are going to take some acetone and just clean up any spray paint residue. And now that our rims are clean, I am going to apply my pinstripes. I am using a holographic rose gold and white. Both of these are from my local supplier, which is Perfect Press HTV. They are located in Norcross, Georgia. If you guys are close to that area, I definitely suggest checking them out. They're about 30 minutes from me, but I always take like a monthly trip and kind of stock up on vinyl. And my pinstripe file is available on thedrunkflamingo.com. It has my most popular sizes that I use, which is the 0.07, 0.05, and 0.03 sizes. I like to cut all sizes out at a time. So my rose gold has all 3 sizes, my white has all 3 sizes. I have a couple other colors that I use a lot that is cut in all 3 of these sizes. That way I have several different options to choose from. I can layer certain colors if I want to. And that way I'm not having to cut out pinstripes if I just need a few. And I am just kind of applying these pinstripes in a pattern that I like. There's no real direction, I guess. I'm just kind of doing what I think will look cool. And I thought this rose gold and white went well with the color glitter I used, as well as the pink leopard vinyl. So once I get my pinstripes on, I am going to apply my actual decal, which are just a few words to "somewhere over the rainbow." I thought that was a cute little phrase to put on this rainbow tumbler. So I am just layering the quote, my white on top of my beige vinyl. And I created this decal by just kind of measuring the space that I had to work with on the tumbler, and then kind of formed the words in sort of a triangle shape. And I am just kind of matching it up on one end, putting my paper down just to see if that would look good. And it did, because I did not want the words to overlap the other side of the vinyl. And then of course the words stuck back to the carrying sheet. It would be my luck. Y'all know things can never go right in my tutorials. There's always one thing that just, you know, has to happen. So once I get my words on there, I'm just making sure everything is down flat, that we don't have any wrinkles. And now we are going to apply the top part of the decal. And this is why I like using transfer tape that has lines on it. It really does help me line everything up correctly. And I'm just going to center this as best I can. Press everything down, make sure it's all smooth and wrinkle free. And I noticed that I was missing the dot to my eye. Anytime that I'm missing a little dot or a comma, if it is a basic color, I will just go back in with my paint pen. There's no need to print another little dot for your eye. I also decided that I wanted my little ampersand ampersand, the little and symbol a little bit larger. So I just cut one out a little bit larger, and we're just applying it right in the center of that vinyl. So I was pretty happy with how this was turning out. And now what we're going to do is apply our rainbow to our tumbler. And I am just going to use some E6000 adhesive. It is not my favorite adhesive to use, but I do like it to attach pieces like this because it is a fairly tacky adhesive and it gets really gummy quickly, which is what I like. And you can clearly see the glue like squishing out all over my hands. Ugh, it's so gross because I hate these packages. They are metal, so if they get like a little hole in them, that glue just squirts out everywhere. But anyway, I am just squeezing some glue out on the rainbow, and we are just going to let it sit for a minute and thicken up so that when we apply it to our tumbler, it is not going to move. It's just going to attach right to that tumbler and not go anywhere. Liquid Fusion is another adhesive that I really like, but it is more liquid, so it will take a little bit longer for it to kind of set up on the tumbler. So I am just going to take my rainbow and I'm just going to apply it right in the center of our leopard vinyl. I am making sure that the little fringe on the rainbow is not covering the words, and just kind of making sure it's even on both sides. I'm pressing it down so it's not going to go anywhere. And once that rainbow has dried, I am going to go over the edges of my pinstripe with just a little bit of UV resin. This is how I keep my pinstripes from lifting under epoxy. I know that is a big problem. Sometimes some vinyl just refuses to stay down, so I am just taking a tiny bit of UV resin and just applying it to the edges only of my pinstripes. And I'm not getting like a big glob of it. I am just smoothing down a small section, and then we are going to cure that for about 2 minutes. And once that side is cured, we are going to do the same thing with the top side. We are just smoothing out that UV resin right on the edges of these pinstripes. And then we are going to cure this side for another 2 minutes. And once you're sure everything is completely dry, the UV resin as well as the adhesive we used to connect our rainbow, we are going to take this downstairs and we are going to epoxy again. So now we are outside again, mixing up some more fast set, and I am going to take a paintbrush and we are just going to paint a thin layer over that rainbow. Sometimes I like to use paintbrushes on 3D objects because it can really get in those little crevices. This rainbow has a lot of little pieces with the fringe, and those little individual fibers on the paintbrush can really get in those tiny little clay pieces. And I am just taking my paintbrush and going all the way around my rainbow so it gets in all of those little cracks and crevices. And with the paintbrush as well, if you have a glob of epoxy somewhere, you can just swipe it, pick up the extra epoxy, and just wipe it off on the edge of your tumbler. So once I have the rainbow covered with epoxy, I am just going back in over the rest of the tumbler just with a regular gloved finger. Just making sure everything is covered. I had just enough epoxy for this layer. I really needed just a little bit more, but since this was our first layer, it wasn't really that big of a deal. So I am just going back, smoothing everything out, making sure that there are no globs of epoxy around my rainbow. Just really kind of digging epoxy out of there, y'all can see. And then I am also going back with my paintbrush, just making sure there's not just pools of epoxy, because that can gather air bubbles and we don't want that on our cup. Sometimes air bubbles are unavoidable. This is a 3D tumbler, so there is going to be parts that may have air bubbles on them, but I try to get rid of them as best as I can. And once we have our epoxy all on there, I am just going to take my torch and we are going to torch all of the bubbles. So I will apply 2 layers of epoxy, and once our tumbler is completely done, we are going to go and do our glitter butt. I am using UV resin for this glitter butt. Most of the time I use a fast set, but for this particular one, I decided to use UV resin. I am using white first because I did not paint the tumbler. So I just want to show you guys different options of what you can do. So instead of painting the bottom, you can just use white UV resin if you have that. Once that is pure, we are going to mix up clear UV resin with a couple of translucent glitters. If you are going to do a glitter bottom with UV resin, you do want to use glitters that are going to be translucent, transparent, opal-y type of vinyl, and do very, very thin layers. That way the UV resin, or sorry, the UV light can penetrate through the UV resin and cure it all the way through. If you do thick layers, or if you use glitter that is super opaque, that UV light will not be able to penetrate the resin and it will not cure properly. So even though this particular glitter I'm using, which is Soul Taker, does have some opaque pieces in it, I don't know if you can tell in the video, but it is a super, super thin layer. And the white that I used is Dusty Rose, which also has a lot of translucent glitters. It's not opaque. I am also getting my tag from Missy's Doodles ready. I will link her below if you guys want to check out her shop. She made these cute little logo tags for me, and I am just painting the back of it with a Posca paint pen so that my logo is a pink color versus just silver. So we are going to cure this for 2 to 3 minutes. I like to make sure it is super cured. And then we are going to go in with a thin layer of clear UV resin on top. I like to seal everything in, that way the bottom of the tumbler and the body of the tumbler have the same textures. They're both that slick, shiny feel. And then we're going to cure this for another 3 minutes. And I totally forgot that I was going to add leopard print. I would have added this in the previous step, but I forgot. But I had to get it on there because I thought it would be really cute for the bottom. This is just random leopard print that I had sitting around that I cut for pens like 2 years ago. And once I get this leopard print on, I am going to go back with another clear layer of UV resin. Again, very thin. We don't need anything super thick. And then we are going to cure this for another 3 minutes. And once you're done with the glitter butt, it is completely finished. So here are some finished pictures of our 3D rainbow tumbler. I love how it turned out. I hope you guys do as well. If you decide to try something like this, please tag me because I love to see you guys' work. Post in the Drunk Flamingo, post in Damn Fancy Creations. I love to see what you guys come up with based off of my tutorials. If y'all enjoyed this video or learned something new, please be sure to like, subscribe, and share. Don't forget to catch the next video coming up that was picked just for you. As always, if you're looking for more tips, tricks, or tutorials, be sure to check out my tutorial group on Facebook or my Damn Fancy tribe. Both are linked in the description. Thanks for watching!